afternoon, Migrant Leaders Mentors. Thank you so much for joining us today on our quarterly Migrant Leaders Mentors webinar. As you know, each time we have a couple of minutes from myself talking about a topic, an update on migrant leaders. And every time, each quarter, we have one of our mentors who will be doing a presentation and talk as a keynote speaker. Today, we are honored to have Alana Henry, who is simply one of the very interesting people I have met, given her background working for senior governments in the US as well as the UK as a government advisor. And I will let Alana introduce herself later. In the meantime, I will give you a brief update on migrant leaders and the various pieces of research that are of relevance to us. So I shall be trying to share my screen with you. You should now be able to see what is our March impact report. The next impact report is due in a couple of weeks' time, and we will have huge updates for you in our next impact report out the 3rd or 4th week of July we are working towards. But in the meantime, I wanted to talk to you about the latest update on the Parker Review. It's a message that is important to repeat, actually. You will remember that I launched the Migrant Leaders Charity back in 2017 as a direct response to the Parker Review, which at that time showed us that ethnic diversity in UK corporates was not in a good place. Back then, it showed us that only 2% of FTSE 100 boardrooms, including non-execs, were citizens of colour, when actually 14% of the UK population are citizens of colour. And that was based on the 2011 census data. I looked at the data further back in 2017 and saw that actually only 1.3% of FTSE 100 directors, including non-execs, are migrants. And out of those migrant directors, almost all of them were privately educated, which told me something about the state of social mobility in the UK. And I felt the impetus to do something about that. And hence, here we are with migrant leaders. So where is Migrant Leaders today as a direct response to the Parker Review? Migrant Leaders today is that we have just over 1,000 mentors from FTSE 100, from 95 FTSE 100 and leading firms. And we have corporate partnerships now with 9 major companies, including BP, Salesforce, Westcon, Illumina, Ipsos, which are the latest ones to join us as corporate partners. And you'll hear in the coming weeks and months about the collaborations that we are doing with them, bringing internships, training, work experiences, and opportunities to our 1,000 or so migrant leaders mentees. So going back to our reason why migrant leaders started, where is the Parker Review today? Actually, there was an update in 2022. And on a promising note, it showed that now 16% of FTSE 100 boardrooms, including non-execs, are citizens of colour. And actually, if you update for the census data, that should be broadly in line with the ethnic minority population in the UK. There is a but though, because if you look at this data, you will note that this includes non-execs. So the Parker Review quite rightly points out that the next wave of progress has got to be the key executive board roles. If you look at the FTSE 100 now, only 6 CEOs and only 12 other executive directors in the FTSE 100 come from an ethnic minority background. Clearly, that's not at all representative of the population. And I'm sure that if we look at the social mobility aspect, we need even further representation in terms of social mobility. So there's more work to be done. On a positive note, the target of 1 by 21, which said that we wanted by year 2021, each of the FTSE 100 to have at least one ethnic minority director, including non-execs. And 89 of the FTSE 100 achieve that. 89 of the FTSE 100 have at least one director on their boards who is from an ethnic minority background, and this includes non-execs. There is more work to be done. To give you a little bit more context and cutting the data in a different way, I found the Institute for Fiscal Studies report, the Dayton Review, particularly helpful because in 2021, they published an interim report which looked at migrant children in the UK. It told us what I think we knew already, that ethnic minority and migrant children are highly educated. Migrant children in the UK have double the rate of university degrees compared to the white British majority. 55% of migrant children in the UK have degrees compared to the 26% of white British majority. But the same group are up to 7% behind in employment and are even further behind in attaining professional jobs and managerial progression. So clearly, in my view, that's a loss to the British economy and a human tragedy. It's something that we are trying to directly address in Migrant Leaders by working with first and second generation young migrants and helping them attain educationally, but also to turn that excellent education into professional achievement and progression. And I'm really grateful to our Migrant Leaders mentors for helping us do that, and to our corporate partners in helping us do that so early in the lives of first and second generation young migrants. Thank you for listening to me today. Without further ado, I am going to pass the platform to our speaker today, who's going to be talking about social justice, particularly with a US and UK perspective, given her very interesting government experience. Alana Henry will introduce herself and deliver her talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elham, and really nice to meet you all. Honestly, first, I just want to thank, of course, Elham and the Migrant Leaders team for allowing me to be here and speak with you all. I think this topic is really important as far as social justice, and I believe that the work that Migrant Leaders is doing is helping to promote social justice. So as Elham said, I am Alana Henry. I currently work for the Department for Business as a civil servant, and I work with ministers, all ministers at Bays, as far as their visits and engagements. Previous to this role, I was actually working at the British Embassy in Washington, where I took on a similar role, but underwent some international visits for the Ministry of Defense, for the Foreign Office, and then also for other government ministers and groups of local MPs, for example, who were traveling to Washington, D.C. Throughout that work, I really got to understand a lot of topics such as human rights, social justice, and then other things that are important to the UK and US relationship. And my team and I were very instrumental in making sure that the senior government officials who were coming to Washington, D.C. and meeting with people in the White House, Pentagon, so forth and so on, really helped to strengthen the tie between the US and the UK. So that's a little bit about me, and I'll go ahead and get started with my presentation. So it says that it was disabled share. Okay, perfect. So I'll go ahead and share my screen now. Okay. Let's do this actually. Can everyone see this?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Now, unfortunately, I'm unable to see you. So let me see if I can. Okay, let's see if I can do it this way. Sorry, everyone. Okay. Okay, I can't, but it's okay. So we'll go ahead with the presentation. And if you need anything, please just shout. As I said, I'm not able to see you, unfortunately, but hopefully you can see these slides. So we'll start off with social justice. And I really appreciate Elham for allowing me to come and speak about this topic that's actually very near and dear to me, and also one of my passion projects that I like to do. So really, when we talk about social justice, today's conversation is going to be kind of around identifying it and breaking down what social justice really means, and then understanding kind of how we can incorporate social justice aspects into our everyday lives, really. So I'll first start off with an activity. What does social justice mean to you? And so to help get this conversation started, I have a Slido presentation. So if you can see this, can everyone see this?
Yes, we can.
No?
Oh,
Okay.
I can't see the Slido activity. We can still see your PowerPoint.
Ah, okay. Sorry about that. 1 second. Let's see. I can go back. Let me try something different.
That's working now.
You just have to unmute yourself, Alana. We now can't hear you, Alana. What I might suggest, Alana, is let's go old-fashioned.
Yes.
Let's have a conversation between us and the mentors about what is social justice to them. Would that be okay?
That's perfect. Can you hear me though?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. All right. So we will definitely go old school. So what does social justice mean to you? Can anyone kind of unmute themselves if you want to put something in the chat? But it would be great to kind of get some discussion going. So what does social justice mean to you?
Does anyone want to go first? I'm happy to. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just said equal opportunities.
Equal opportunities. Yeah, I love that phrase. I think it's really encompassing of what social justice is. Any other definitions that we might have?
It's about inclusion as well.
Inclusion. Yeah, I love that one, actually. Yeah. Any other phrases or words, or when you hear social justice, what comes to your mind?
Compensation.
Compensation. Okay. In what way? Can you explain a little more?
I see that depending on the background, people must have inherited some difficulties in life, so have a harder background. So they need support to overcome the challenge. As Ellen has said, although the average education is higher between the minorities, they still have challenges that are biased. So they need some form of compensation to help them make through and achieve positions of power in which we make this bias be more dissipated.
So we are probably talking about positive discrimination.
Positive, yeah, because discriminations are a heavy word.
Yeah, I don't like the phrase either, but to date, at least, they've called it positive discrimination. Things like quotas on the boards for females, for example. You may agree or disagree, and these are divisive subjects, actually. But yeah, some kind of compensation until the playing field is a little bit more even.
Yeah. And I think an interesting thing to actually put that just kind of some support as far as making sure everyone has equal opportunity. And I like that word compensation, because normally when you hear social justice, you wouldn't think about that. But I love the concept that you just stated, where things and processes and programs such as migrant leaders are here in place to make sure everyone has that fair opportunity. And so the next question that was going to be on our Slido activity is, how do you think we can achieve social justice? I'll take maybe 2 or 3 people just to kind of unmute and tell us, how do you think we can achieve social justice?
I guess for me, the question I ask myself always is, do I, on the one hand, want to give opportunities to underrepresented groups early in their lives, or do I want to engage with those underrepresented groups later in their lives, but give them some kind of compensation or extra help? For me, I think it's preferable that we support underrepresented groups early on so that they grab those opportunities themselves and hopefully don't need to be compensated later on in their journey. I would hope that opportunities are a little bit more fair so that people can take the chance for themselves and develop and achieve what they deserve.
Yeah, I love that. I'll take one more person to answer the question of how do you think we can achieve social justice? Just one more person, one more answer.
Hi, everyone. I think following up on what Ilham said, it's about defining who we're going to help first. Because sometimes we say we generalize and we run programs to help, for example, refugees, but not all refugees have the same needs. Or when we segregate people and we build a program for female founders and we have a room full of just female founders, and then the male founders just going to hear about their success rather than seeing them in the field being successful. So I think starting from what Ilham said, we really need to define who we are helping and not to generalize on BAME communities or underrepresented or female founders. Go specific is key.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with that. And I love that. It's kind of like taking stock of the needs of the community first to understand kind of what they need in order to help them reach social justice. So thank you all for participating in this little activity just to get us started. I'll continue on with the presentation, but as I'm going through, just have those 2 questions in your mind. So 1, what does social justice really mean to you? And 2, how do you think we can actually achieve this? So going forward in the presentation, what is social justice? And I love this answer from the San Diego Foundation. It's a nonprofit organization in San Diego, California. And I came across them when I was working in Washington, D.C. And basically their aim is to ensure that their community and they're supporting social justice throughout their community. And so they break it down simply like this. Social justice is the view that everyone deserves equal economic, political, and social rights and opportunities. And I love that because it also talks about the economic and social rights and opportunities that I don't think sometimes we touch on. And so it's just saying that everyone, despite your background, where you're from, who you are, what job you have, what class you're in, what race or minority or ethnic background you have, that everybody deserves these equal rights and opportunities. And I love that it included both, because rights are obviously something that, you know, great, we by law are expected to have, but opportunities are different. Not everyone has the opportunity to explore some of these economic or political or social opportunities in society, including work opportunities as well. And so I think that's important to remember, that although they're both separate things, one is required and one is just kind of happenstance, depending on what community you're in, that both are attributed to social justice. So the next question is, how can we actually achieve this? And this is something that I've asked everyone. And again, thank you for the answers. And so I'll talk a little bit about my story and how my group and I was the chair of minority ethnic group at the British Embassy in Washington, D.C. And we were in a diversity and inclusion group. We were part of the diversity and inclusion board. And we were a group of about 45 of us throughout the US. These are mainly diplomats, but some locally engaged staff, and how we wrote a race action paper to help support social justice. So 8 minutes, 15 seconds. I mean, when you hear that, there's a story that should come back to your mind. About a year or so ago, the name of George Floyd, who was an African-American male, who was killed on behalf of police officers, and they were white police officers. And it's interesting because in the US, as very much similar to the UK, police and other professionals within that space, we do trust them with our lives. However, George Floyd's life was taken away by the same people that we trusted. And so if you know the story, you can do some research on it, but the police officer kneeled on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 15 seconds. Just imagine that. In those 8 minutes and 15 seconds, you can hear on the video, if you ever stomached to be able to actually see the video, which I couldn't fully, but you can hear him crying out for his mom, but you can hear him saying, "I can't breathe." And so just imagine that, right? Anytime we're in a situation and it's overbearing, or we're saying like, "I can't breathe," or, "Oh, we're like," we may joke around and say these things, but in this situation, it was a serious call for help, but yet no one around was able to do anything. And so during that time, the British ambassador, Her Majesty's ambassador, tasked myself and my team to come up with a race action paper, because as the world watched this scenario that happened, they were only getting a taste of what the history of racism in the US, but also the history of racism in other countries as well. And I think this situation really gave a spotlight to it, right? And this ties very much into social justice, just the right to live, right? And this is an important right, but having that opportunity, no matter what background you are and you're coming from, that should be a right to everyone. So the British ambassador asked, how can we get involved in race relations? And so my team and I came up with an action paper that was around these 3 pillars. And these 3 pillars are educate, engage, advocate. Now, it's interesting because we just came up with this to kind of put into, I guess, a box, some actions that can be taken. Because when we talk about social justice, when we talk about race relations, there's so many things that we can do, but we wanted to make sure people had a palatable and bite-sized opportunities to understand how they can undertake race relations and promoting ultimately social justice. So first was education, so educate. So in order to talk about an issue, or in order to support something or call something wrong or right, you need to know exactly what you're fighting for, right? So my team and I came up with a plethora of opportunities, both videos, TED Talks, books, articles, just helping people understand what racism is and why it's so deadly. And not only in the US, we actually also provided some race-related papers, videos, TED Talks in the UK as well, because a lot of people at the time, especially diplomats, and I overheard some conversations and some felt comfortable to come to me and talk to me and ask me, well, the US, we see this racism in the US, but where is it in the UK? We don't see it as much. We don't see things because maybe it's not as overt. And so with this first pillar, we wanted to educate people on the history of racism, show them some examples, and hear from actual people, not only people of minority backgrounds, but also white British people, white American people, and just help them understand what this issue of racism is. The next phase is engage. So once you take that education, you've now learned, how can you then engage in helpful and meaningful conversations? So what does that look like? Well, that can look like at home. Maybe there are conversations around race that are happening, or in friend groups. Maybe there's a comment that's made that actually, although it's passed off as ignorant, maybe it could have some racial undertones to it. And so how can you use the education that you've learned about what the problem is to then engage in those conversations and really have open discussions about how this actually is an issue? Another way to engage is actually to attend some cultural events. So learning more about, for example, the Windrush generation, and attending some events around Windrush, and to really understand how the Windrush generation came to the UK and helped to build the very society that is now trying to, or has in some ways systematically blocked success or progress. But how can we then go to and attend events and really understand more about other cultures around us, right? And then last is advocate. So after you've educated yourself, After you've engaged in those conversations, advocate is really that action piece that not only benefits you, but benefits the people around you. So how can you stand up for those, and how can you do that through supporting social justice? Well, my team and I thought about this very logically, because obviously there's a lot of things that we wanted to tell people. But one of the key ways that we found was in the workforce. And so how can we advocate for a more diverse and inclusive workforce? Well, we gave an example of planning an event. When you're planning an event and you want to invite certain people, you want to invite speakers who would come and talk. Who do you invite? Where do you reach out to, right? Are you only inviting those stakeholders that you know? What about other stakeholders, maybe in Brixton or Croydon or other places, other areas that may be able to speak on the topic, but also would also benefit of attending the actual event that you're putting on? So how do we do that, right? And that's a great way to really make sure that you're not only allowing the audience to be diverse, but the speakers themselves are also diverse and from diverse backgrounds, which help to develop a well-rounded perspective on the topic that you want to discuss. Also, job and hiring. So how do we do that? Where do we reach out to? Where do you post job advertisements? Is it only through LinkedIn? Do you also talk to community colleges around you and not just maybe the famous Oxford? How do you really reach out to other people, right? Through internships as well. Do you allow internships that may help support financially some of your interns? Are there opportunities for internships and interns to apply from different parts of the country? How do we ensure that we are advocating and giving and showcasing these opportunities for people? One of the greatest things about Migrant Leaders is this is actually an advocacy foundation. This is where just being involved and being a mentor is how you can properly advocate for people and showcase the opportunities that are out there in the workforce. And so just by being mentors, you're already kind of taking on these 3 steps in a way and really helping to educate your mentees as well on how to, get these opportunities, but then also showcasing and demonstrating that there are people there who support them and who are uplifting them and who want to see their progress as well. As I close, I just wanted to leave you with this one question around those 3 pillars. And it's really, how can you use the 3 pillars of educate, engage, and advocate to promote social justice? And maybe I can take a couple of hands, or maybe a couple of people that would want to share what they think about the 3 pillars, maybe in different ways that they see that they can incorporate it into their daily lives or even work schedules. But how can we really take bite-sized pieces of social justice, break it down within these 3 pillars, and help to promote it? So I'll stop there. And anyone wanted to comment on this question?
I had raised my hand, but it was actually because I also want to raise a question. So I'm quite happy to answer this, but I need some guidance because we as a company, also as individuals, we are creating a few environments within the business where we can give voice to diversity and help our employees to feel a lot more included into the company policies. Like we care about them.
Yeah.
However, my question is all around, because these are all on paper, they look like, oh yeah, we are doing the right things. We have created employee groups where people can talk and raise their concerns. We have people that look in at policies, people that are talking to other employees that need support. But something that sometimes comes across is how genuine these efforts really are, because sometimes when a corporate tries to change that perception and look more diverse, more inclusive, more open, to make everybody feel like we are respectful, a lot of people, they perceive that as being just a box ticking exercise, like, oh yeah, you have to say these things. So sometimes we have debates around, should we have a leader to share these messages, or should we have somebody that is not in a leadership position but is a little bit closer and more relatable from an employee point of view? And there are different opinions on that, because some people really respond well to a leadership person, somebody from leadership, and other people prefer just one of their own. So my question was really around, how do you make it look as genuine as it is as possible, because we really, you know, we, like probably many other companies are doing this, we really mean well, we really want to change things, but just we want to make sure that people are confident, you know, we build confidence and trust as we do that.
Lucia, if I can add a corporate perspective to that before Alana responds. From a corporate perspective, I know that Westcon Comstore, your company, is one of the Migrant Leaders partners. I know how genuinely each and every one of you mean diversity and inclusion and representation. And it's fantastic to continue to work with you guys. I think there are two, in my mind, there are two groups of D&I activity in a company that would yield results. One is about reality, the other is about perception. And there are two sides of the same coin, and you can't ignore either. On the one hand, the reality to me is that numbers don't lie. If a corporate tells me that we have employee resource groups, we say the right things and we do the right things, but our leadership is still not diverse, and the next layer in the organization is still not diverse, and we don't have a talent pipeline that is diverse, numbers don't lie. Something is wrong. And yes, it may take a bit of time, but eventually the numbers need to show it. And that's the reality. Therefore, I would put effort in activities that boost reality, which is recruitment of underrepresented talent, progression and development programs, sponsorship that really helps lift the underrepresented talent into the next layer in the organization, and support when they need it in the organization so that you retain that underrepresented talent. That's about reality. Perception is equally important, because I remember in terms of relatable role models, for example, you know, at EY, where I spent the best part of 10 years, generally the perception was that partners in EY are a certain type, they are not very diverse, they are not from underrepresented groups. And actually, when we did this, this campaign called My Story campaign, where wide set of partners at EY in UK and I did a video selfie of themselves in their everyday lives and in their homes as well as their work, actually the EY population realized partners are people, and actually they are leaders like us, you know, they're not that different to us. And shifting that perception really helped, because the underrepresented talent in EY hopefully realized, oh yes, I could one day become a partner, because actually they're not that different to us, you know? So it's a question of reality and perception.
Thank you, Elam. This is actually really insightful, because it's a very fine line, you know, we try.
Yeah, and I actually want to come in on there, because I think there's two things kind of going with that. So one is mindset of people. And what I've learned through this work of just not only when I take on these opportunities to include, be more diverse and inclusive, but also just what I represent and what I stand for, you can't change the mind of people as far as forcing them to understand, like, yes, we are genuine about this. The only thing you do, as Elham said, is show them the numbers, show them the proof, show them the facts. And when you do that, people do listen. I think one of the questions that you asked also was about having maybe a senior leader or potentially someone who's not as senior, but someone who they can relate to. I think do both. And the reason being is because I noticed when I was the chair of the minority ethnic group, although I am a minority myself, it was very helpful when we had the head of the Ministry of Defense, who I partnered with, but also the British ambassador and the deputy ambassador standing behind me and helping to elevate my voice. And the reason being that that's so important is that they may be able to speak in circles where I cannot. So they were able to talk to all of the heads of the different consulates, and so the consulate generals in the US, and they were able to champion the race action paper that we actually produced. And so it helped to have senior backing towards our efforts and what we're trying to do. One thing that the paper actually went on to do is actually influence some of the policies around diversity, or around recruitment, and making sure that recruitment itself is diversity inclusive when it comes to not only the locally engaged staff, but also diplomats who are being posted to the US. And so making sure that that process is as fair and as inclusive and as diverse as possible, so that it can represent not only the UK, but also represent the US, which the US is very diverse as well. So I think to answer a little bit of your question, definitely shoot for both, because what happens is when you have people who are not only passionate about this, and they may not be passionate at first, but as Elham says, show them the facts, show them proof, show them stats, and show them how basically ensuring that diversity and inclusion is within your network is important, how it will benefit them in the long run. And I'll say this one thing, and I see Fazia's hand is raised, but I one time had, in maybe I guess a situation at the embassy where I had to showcase why having a diverse senior board is important. Because if we're going to talk about diversity, you can talk about it all day long, but if I myself don't see anyone who represents me in some of the most senior positions, how do I then believe that you're genuine? And so it's really kind of helping the senior leadership to understand why this is important, how it can also help with retention rates. It can also help with making sure that you're recruiting some of the best and skilled across the UK. And then also the genuine point that I wanted to mention is, you're right, this isn't a tick box exercise, and it shouldn't be. But in a way, use that opportunity, not saying showcase it as a tick box exercise, but show them the reason why it's important. And if they view it as a tick box exercise now, once they start seeing stats and understanding and connecting the dots between the progress that they want to have in their business, but then also the efforts of making it diverse and inclusive, they'll stop looking at it as a tick box exercise and start understanding it as, well, this is important for business. How can we make sure that this is at the front foot of what we do in all aspects? So hopefully some of that kind of answers a few of your questions. But yeah.
It does actually. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alana. It does.
Yeah, of course. So I see two hands raised.
I wanted to just illustrate something that sort of follows up on Lucia's question and also what you were just saying, Alana. So just from personal experience, in a former role where so the organisation had set up group networks, staff networks, and it was the time when there was an anniversary coming up. It was the anniversary of the NHS and Windrush. And I had the idea of actually doing something about the people we were working with and how they might have been part of the Windrush generation that contributed to the strength of the NHS when it was first established. Now, I'm a person of colour, and I'm a woman and a part-time worker. So I had wanted to do this piece of work and was in this network, but I wasn't chairing it or I wasn't leading it. I was kind of just going to contribute. And I was blocked basically by the person that was chairing this group. My feeling was it was because I was the wrong colour. And so essentially I wasn't able to contribute to this piece of work just because I wasn't unable to go to the meetings in the time that I was there. And so in effect, this group that had been set up wasn't genuine because I wasn't able to contribute. And you know, I like to contribute. So, and I spoke to the senior person in the organisation to explain the experience and make some suggestions about how this could be addressed. Because essentially I was blocked by somebody that was supposed to be leading this group. But, you know, there was some limited understanding about what the role was and actually what equal opportunities are in there. So, you know, there was a selection issue there. And you know, I'm not backwards in coming forward, but I had been silenced essentially, which is unusual. And I also then lost the energy to actually try and do anything more about it, because, you know, there's some battles that you just can't be bothered to have. So I just wanted to illustrate as an example of what could go wrong. And ultimately, the piece of work that was done by somebody else was rubbish. So, you know, so we weren't able, so my original idea was to let's use some examples from amongst our beneficiaries who were involved in the NHS, who might be part of the Windrush generation or family of the Windrush generation. Let's show how Windrush contributed to this massive, wonderful thing that we have in this country. That's a major part of this country. And that didn't happen. So, you know, our beneficiaries lost out, the organisation lost out. And, you know, a really good piece of work that would have showcased contributions from our beneficiaries was not produced. So, you know, you can see the kind of individual impact, and then the organisational impact, and then the impact on the beneficiaries of that organisation, just because things weren't kind of sorted out properly.
Yeah. The interesting thing, Fawzia, is that I bet if they had a genuine conversation with you about the ideas for this group and actually included your idea among the others, and if they actually bothered to hear you, you would have been satisfied with any outcome.
Oh,
it sounds like they didn't even bother to give that opportunity, which is unacceptable.
Yeah.
And I do think, well, first, I just want to say I'm so sorry that that happened to you, because if we're going to talk about diversity and inclusion, it's diversity and inclusion of all thought as well, ensuring that everyone has a fair opportunity to also pitch ideas for events, something so simple and so, I guess, not as big as like everyone thinks social justice is, but that's as simple as social justice gets, right? And yeah, it is unfortunate. And there are, I think the issue is definitely people who are placed in charge, but do they really have a passion for what they're working towards or what they're fighting towards, right? So a lot of people might take opportunities like that to kind of showcase, yes, you know, I am diverse, I am inclusive, and try to kind of showcase what they can do. But in actuality, are they really promoting that in their day-to-day? So yeah, I'm so sorry that has happened to you, but thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, and just to follow up on Peter's question about for whose benefit I was blocked, for the benefit of the person that blocked me. And you know, that wasn't really about it was that person doing that, taking on that role for their own benefit, you know, look at me rather than look at what I can do.
Exactly. That's
yeah, which is, and it's disappointing, isn't it? Because it actually undermines the strategic objectives of the organisation. So there was good stuff happening above, there's good stuff happening on the ground, and yet individuals are blocking. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I do see there's another hand that's raised. Happy to take that question.
Thanks, Alana. So I guess that was human bias interfering with Fawzia's involvement, right?
Right.
But what do you think of the role technology is playing? Because all these algorithms that are forcing decisions and all that are probably accentuating biases rather than creating social justice. So in the work you've done, have you come across issues with technology?
Great question. So I won't have a full answer to that, but I can kind of give some experience. So the question was around recruitment at the British Embassy in Washington, and how do we recruit? So the first question was, well, do we do a blind recruitment where, you know, we just allow the computer to calculate these different things, and certain like diversity or just like information that's personal to the person is blocked out totally. So we just get the best of the best. But in that way, then how are we ensuring that diversity is also inclusive within the people who we, for example, give interviews for when we select to the job, right? So in that way, I could see where blind applications can be beneficial as far as blocking out names, because there was a question around discriminating names on applications. But then kind of like what we said similar early on, Elham, when you mentioned, I think it was positive discrimination. So how do we then make sure that things, I guess, or processes are in place to ensure that the pool that we're not only reaching out to, but giving interviews are diverse? And to be honest, I haven't had a solution to that yet. I do see the purpose of blind recruitment. And I think that there is a purpose and that there is a certain point in the process where blind recruitment is very important. But then I also see how it can kind of not count for some of those diverse backgrounds that people have that are applying. And I think one thing that maybe I have asked or told for the ones who are recruiting interns, specifically at the British Embassy in Washington, is maybe asking a question on the application of understanding more about their background. Why are they interested in this role? Why is this role important to them? What are they trying to get out of it? Because I think when people are asked that question, sometimes they do, of course, put like different skills that they've done, but they also do explain why they're passionate about it, how this connects to maybe an event in the past. And you can kind of see where their experiences shine. So as I'm still kind of figuring out with you, and I'd love for all of us to discuss, and if anyone has some experiences on how we can use technology for good rather than sometimes hindrance, I'd love to hear from you, and I can take some of this away as well in my future discussions with recruiters and HR teams. Oh, I see Adam's hand is raised. Is it to this point?
Yeah, yes, it's just a quick point on the blind recruitment. I know obviously you work within the British government, and I know British government recruitment employs quite a lot of blind recruitment, and I have mixed feelings about it myself. I understand the purpose of it, but I guess it's to level the playing field, but I don't think this conversation is about leveling the playing field. I think it's about providing extra access to people who are below the playing field, if that makes sense. So I think blind recruitment actually works against a lot of minorities because it minimizes their experiences, and the recruiters don't actually see that person. And I think we need to get to a place where recruiters appreciate the things that minorities can bring to the table, as opposed to just saying, okay, it's good enough just to put you at the same level. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of blind recruitment, but I can see why some people do it.
Yeah, and honestly, I share in your same sentiment, to be honest with you. I definitely see the positives about it. I do see some of the negatives. One thing that I know in some previous discussions was that they decided to take off, of course, the university that people go to, because obviously with that, you can discriminate from a certain selection of people, which I thought was in most ways helpful. But yeah, it's just one thing that I think as we move forward, we'll find ways and solutions to really make sure that technology is helping those and reach their goals as well.
It's interesting, Adam, before we move to Tunde and his hand up, we'd love to hear from. I share your sentiment too, Adam. But I think what you're asking for is, as ethnic minorities or underrepresented talent, we want their hearts and minds. We want the decision makers' hearts and minds. We want them to like us. We want them to include us, knowing everything about us. I totally share that sentiment. But what I see in my mind is a bit of a maturity curve in every society and organization, and even in every family. They might not be ready for that yet. So first, we've got to get in, and once they get to know us, we will gain their hearts and minds. So let us get in first.
Definitely. I think I see Tunde and Julia, I believe.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. So
yes.
I think I'll be influenced by the book that I'm currently listening to, and that is The Promised Land by Barack Obama. And based on what we've been talking about so far, I think key to social mobility is actually representation in leadership itself.
Yeah.
Because I also have a problem with the term minority ethnic groups, because I'm a member of the British Medical Association, the Regional Council, and we're having a meeting recently, and then someone raised an important question that at what point do we stop referring to ourselves, I mean, people of color, Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups, as the minority? Because if you look at the workforce in the NHS, I would say that, I mean, I don't have the statistics at hand, but I would say that people that are of Black, Asian, or minority and ethnic groups in quotes are not really the minority. They're kind of like the majority of the workforce. But when you look at the senior leadership, it's a whole different story, and it kind of creates what I can call a sense of them versus us culture, because people feel like, yeah, we're not represented well enough. No matter what you say, no matter how many programs you bring, no matter how many communities or committees that you set up, if we cannot see people people that look or talk or act like us in the senior leadership, then I don't think that we are really serious about talking about social mobility. And that's why I'm happy you've raised this point of education, engagement, and advocacy. I think the term minority, again, is not just in terms of color or race. It also makes people feel like the minority in terms of status. And I think that's something that we need to start looking at, the way we describe or we put people into different categories. Just like I said, from the book I was reading, A Promised Land by Barack Obama, you said when he was a senator, he was the only Black or the only African American in Senate. And if you look at proportions, and just like Elan was saying that numbers don't lie, I do not think that the proportions will fit. And if you look at the scale, then I think that things that it's not balanced, because we're talking about social mobility. So if you translate that into many companies or organizations in the UK, if you have, for example, 20% of your workforce being of a diverse background, then I think that only makes sense that at least a certain proportion, about 1 in 5 of your leadership as well, should have that similar representation. You talked about at least one in 2021 for the FTSE, but that is a good improvement, but I'll just say that's also not good enough. So I think the summary of what I'm saying is I think the term minority could also be damaging if we don't look at it very closely. Thank you.
Thank you, Tunde. Honestly, I just wanted to come in there. So first, 2 points that I want to address really quick. The term minority, I agree. I don't like that term. When we were first told that we were the minority ethnic group, myself and my colleagues actually came up with we requested a discussion on how we can rename our group, because minority did not reflect what the US, as far as nowadays, and some of the numbers of the US, it didn't really reflect what was actually going on and what was taking place. So I definitely agree with you. And I think also, I believe that the UK government also came out with a paper around using the term BAME. That BAME is too kind of kitchen sink, where everyone's just put in there as a pot and it becomes a checkoff point as well. So how can we then break down BAME, not even use that term anymore, but still pretty much represent or represent different communities when we're addressing them. The second thing I wanted to mention around the thing that you said around leadership, I definitely agree as well. And I think that is the key thing. But it's not just having minorities in leadership positions, or having people of color in leadership positions. They also have to be passionate about diversity and inclusion, because you can very much have someone who is of color who doesn't really see the importance or really care about it or even want to represent it. And so it will still be the same. There will be no change, and you won't see that some of the changes that you would think this person would make is actually making. So I'd also say, like, yes, I agree having someone of color in leadership positions, but someone who also sees the importance of having diversity and inclusion within their organization.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alana. And Tunde, I think it goes back to the numbers don't lie. In the NHS, you yourself are a cardiology registrar on your way to being a consultant. And whilst the NHS is predominantly staffed by ethnic minorities, a huge contribution they continue to make, but what percentage of consultant doctors are ethnic minority? There's a lot of work to be done. And personally, I understand the arguments about terminology that we may not like. But I'd like to divert our efforts. Once we have discussions about terminology, I prefer to put most of my energy into actions and things that actually shift those numbers. I think that's very, very important. I'd like to see all underrepresented groups fairly represented, and I would like to see everyone having opportunities to succeed, regardless of whether they're from an underrepresented group or not. Anyone, any young person particularly, no matter where they start in their lives, should have the opportunity to fulfill their potential. For me, ultimately, that's the measure of social justice, certainly from a professional perspective. I see that we've got 5 minutes left, and Julia has kindly put her hand up.
Yeah. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I'll be super quick. So it's Friday, and I'm sure everybody just wants to go back to their lives. But it's been really, really interesting. I work at Specsavers, and I'm sure a lot of you know Specsavers, especially if you're in the UK. And we've got a very diverse workforce sort of in the stores and on the ground. But actually, when you get into support office, it's not as diverse. And we've got I'm on the diversity and inclusion team, and we're really trying to find ways to encourage people from more diverse backgrounds to come and work with us. It's really, really tricky. Our head office is in Guernsey, which is a tiny island in the Channel Islands, and it's just not diverse. And, you know, the team there, which is all white people trying to get, you know, we're trying really hard, but trying to understand how we can do that in a fair way so people can come over and work with us and still not feel isolated, all that kind of stuff. There's so many things at play. If you have any ideas, and I think we've got such an amazing community here on this call that, you know, anything to help the team bring that and just come up with something. You know, we've thought about creating a hub or something to funnel more diverse community in Bristol, which is apparently the diversity capital of the UK, you know, just trying to find a way to get that pipeline in. So we're always looking at stuff and trying to find, so that's one of my challenges. And I think one of the other things that we were talking in terms of recruitment and things like that, it's also really, really difficult. I think what I've been trying to do is just get myself involved in communities so I can grow my network in a more diverse community and just get to know people, which has been really, really great. I met some amazing people that way. And also just thinking about how people can use the tools that they have. I know we were talking about blind CVs and stuff like that. And, you know, you've got bots reading CVs. They don't make it through to a human. Really, really hard. And actually, I heard something when I was looking for a job a little while ago that what the kids are doing, apparently, is they're copying the job spec and then putting it on the back of their CV and whiting it out. So when the bots go through, they've got all of the stuff in the job spec and it'll go through and the words will get right. It's just like, kids are so clever, aren't they? They just think of the most amazing things. I don't know if it actually works, but I just wonder if there's life hacks that we can just give people to get through those really, really difficult things and help them sort of get on their way, as well as supporting them through mentoring and stuff like that. So
I think Julia, to address regarding Specsavers, one of the best ways of injecting some diversity and inclusion thinking into your leadership is reverse mentoring, getting your Specsavers senior leadership on the board to mentor migrant leaders, mentees. I myself have learned so much from the mentees over the last 5 years. Reverse mentoring is a really strong way of doing that. And as your network of Specsaver employees are quite diverse, secondments for a year or so into your head office by the underrepresented talent at Specsavers is a really good way of boosting that as well. Some quick wins at least.
Such a good idea. Thank you. Thanks. Perfect.
You. Yeah, so I was going to come in. I was going to come in and actually talk about reverse mentoring because I was actually a part of a reverse mentoring scheme at the British Embassy in Washington. And one of the greatest things that I was able to help is very, very senior leader at the embassy is understand the perspective of a Black woman living in the US, but then also entering a field where it's not as diverse, and you don't see a lot of diverse people taking senior roles. One of the roles that I wanted to be is to be an ambassador or a human rights advisor. So those two roles very much often don't see people like me coming across them. But basically, yeah, I think it's really great. And what Elham said is true. Like, you'll allow your senior leaders to really understand what the plight is, what the issue is. And you can also actually get ideas from them, because they may have creative ways of understanding how to recruit into those more senior leadership positions. So yeah.
Marvelous. We have time for one more raised hand. Patricia, please go ahead.
Hi, hello everybody. So I'm started late in the meeting. Sorry about that, because I was in another meeting at work, and you know how it is. And so I don't know the full conversation that we have here, because I came a little bit later. But I just want to add, and probably it won't be for the discussion, but I'm not sure if within the discussion and inclusion, we also are including neurodiversity, because I think that is a big thing. I don't know if that was discussed before, and it is brilliant, because I think coming from, I mean, I am immigrant in the UK. My kids are mixed background, and also I have a kid that is neurodiverse. And for me, it's super important that companies understand neurodiversity. And I have experience at work where companies don't understand neurodiversity, and then the people that join into teams and things like that are misunderstood, and as a consequence, in my experience so far, what I'm seeing is they have to leave the company because they don't fit the culture. But I truly believe it's because there's not that knowledge within the companies to understand neurodiversity and how good they can be in a job if we can really understand what they want. But that, I don't know if we talk about that one, but yeah.
Thank you so much, Patricia. I think on neurodiversity, I should say that we've been on quite a journey as migrant leaders. We have mentees who are neurodiverse, dyslexia, autism, and we have really tried to work with our corporate partners and mentors to see how we can place them with opportunities among a company and culture who is both educated about neurodiversity, but also their policies and processes facilitate the fulfillment of individuals' potential. So we are still working on it.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that there are lots of huge companies that are actually doing great work with hiring those who have neurodiversity. I think it was Johnson & Johnson who actually came when I was at the New York consulate, and they did a presentation on what they're actually doing, how they're recruiting, and how they're putting policies in place to make sure those who may have like autism, so forth and so on, how they can get the most and bring their best self to work, and they don't have to hide behind their diversity. And they can actually express that diversity in the workplace, but then also other coworkers understand, are knowledgeable of the diversity, and actually not only accept them, but help them excel. So it's not only about talking about neurodiversity, but also showing how they can support it within a workplace or workforce. So yeah, I agree. That's a great point. Thank you so much. And I just want to leave off really quick, because obviously my time has ended. But this is a quote that I love from the former President Barack Obama. And I think Tondi mentioned his book, but he says, "Change will not come if we wait for some other person or if we wait for some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek." And that is just some inspiration as we have this wonderful discussion around social justice, diversity, inclusion. But how can we do it on a day-to-day basis, break down those bite-sized pieces, and help others understand it as well, because we are the change that this world needs to see. Thank you so much.
On that note, Alana, I cannot thank you enough. It's been wonderful hearing you speak. Thank you so much for contributing to Migrant Leaders. I always enjoy our conversations. Everyone, thank you for joining us this afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you all very soon. Thank you.